Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at B2B World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to the issue of Kashmir. And of course, it's something that we've been speaking about for quite some time now. And we've seen that there have been many changes taking place in the region with, of course, measures taken by India with regards to the demographic situation of the occupied valley and changes to the infrastructure, which are, of course, causing a lot of concerns in terms of the very important special status of the occupied valley, which was also unilaterally revoked in 2019. This is an important step in terms of the buildings and the ways forward in terms of the housing settlements and, of course, the infrastructure development in the area by the Indian regime, and, of course, against the UN Security Council resolutions, which is directly impacting the demography of the occupied valley and, of course, impacting the possibilities of the ways in which we have seen the people of Kashmir struggle for their right to self-determination. And this is, of course, very, very integral to what Pakistan also supports diplomatically, politically and morally, and in the ways that we need to, of course, counter this in terms of international cooperation in the UN. This is very, very integral also in terms of what aspects are to be considered when we talk about the struggle of the people of Kashmir that has been going on for decades and what needs to be done about it in light of the plans that have been put forward along the highway. And of course, this is something that directly impacts the situation and is being done so without any consequence, as of course have been the other draconian laws and violations of the UN Security Council resolutions, which again have not been met with any particular consequence. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means in terms of the situation on ground for the people of Kashmir and what possibilities this, of course, holds for the future. That is going to be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to take a look at the internal political situation of Pakistan with reference to the law and order situation of the country and, of course, our fight against terrorism. And we spoke about it just yesterday in terms of the very important and integral aspect in terms of the terrorist organizations that have safe havens in Afghanistan and the ways in which they're impacting terrorist activities within Pakistan and how we need to move forward with the National Action Plan. But there seems to be a difference of opinion in terms of how to actually engage with the Afghan Taliban regime, while the federal government talks about this in terms of dialogue being the only solution forward and sitting on the table. There are other measures taken by the KP government, for example, which has announced that they will be sending a jirga to Afghanistan in this regard. So we're going to be taking a look at how important that consensus is in terms of moving forward and in the ways in which we need to explore this, and then, of course, take a look ahead in our fight against this menace. That is going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal, and we've also been joined online by Dr Awais Bin Wasi, who's a Kashmir expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And Dr. Awais, I want your take on what is it that we want to see in terms of the action taken against the actions of India and, of course, the unilateral measures that have been put into place, and specifically in terms of the ways in which this violates UN Security Council resolutions and international norms and values, and, of course, the very special status of the occupied valley. And I want your take in terms of how this infrastructure developments are impacting the situation on ground in the occupied valley and what changes in the demography of Kashmir will then impact the struggle of the people of Kashmir.
Thank you so much for having me to discuss on this very important development which is taking place in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So I'll start with the second point that you have asked about the United Nations resolution. So United Nations resolution basically prohibit both the parties, India and Pakistan, that they cannot bring about any material change in the which might have implications for the final settlement of the dispute. So India is violating those resolutions by bringing about the material change on the side of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So this is in terms of this legal position in terms of the United Nations resolution that needs to be looked into by the concerned quarters. Secondly, whatever India is doing, that is part of its consistent policy that started when in this BJP-led government, ascended to power in 2014, and since then, this policy was conceived. as to bring about the demographic change through different measures which are being unfortunately being materialized in Jammu and Kashmir. And if we see the history, especially in the last tenure of BJP government, so they had taken some initiatives, and one of the significant initiatives was that to issue domicile certificates, and the rules and regulations that they have made for issuing of the domicile certificates to the apparently to the non-residents or the non-Kashmiris. That is, for example, that any person that who has lived over there for 15 years or worked there in Jammu and Kashmir for 7 years, or his children, they appeared in ninth or 10th grade exam, they can get domicile. And they have asked the concerned authorities that this process must be taken on fast track, and that the one that who is not getting the domicile within 15 days, he might be liable for 50,000 rupees as a penalty. So this was the legislation that they have done it. And secondly, with regard to the recent developments with regard to this seizure of land, then this is not an ordinary land or the barren land. This is a agricultural uh, prime land that is cultivable and that is grazing land. So in the last tenure, they have also brought about some amendment in this their policy of the construction building of construction act that was introduced in 1988, and that amendments were brought about in that. And in that, they have also introduced a policy, housing and township policy. And according to housing and township policy, they have decided to build 2 lakh houses within the upcoming 5 years. So on the one hand, they are going to establish these or construct these houses, and continuing the same, they have also decided to establish scenic colonies for the ex-military personnel. And the third is that the recent developments that on the name of development, on the name of education, they are grabbing Kashmiri's land, Kashmiri's apple orchards, and some other land which is quite significant, and that is the means of their livelihood and sustenance. So they are doing it. We can share a number of example, for example, that. But before we talk about, I think this thing we must bring this in our discussion before we talk about the details of the things which India is doing. That India, when revoked Article 370 and 35A, the reason that India advanced that was that because of 370, these development projects could not be executed, or for the economic prosperity, we are revoking it. But after that, if we see the current statistics issued none other than by the Indian organizations, that in Indian Jammu and Kashmir, the unemployment rate is highest across India. If you compare it, that is a 21% unemployment rate is there in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So that belies their claim about the bringing development or the prosperity or economic development that India apparently pledged to before this revocation of this Article 370 and 35A. So continuing the same, if we see the current developments, which are, for example, that on the name of education, that India wants to establish this National Institute of Technology at Pulwama, but at what cost? The cost is that 600 acres of cultivable prime agricultural land that is being consumed, that is being snatched from the local people, and some 10 districts they largely rely on this cultivable land, and the farmers, they grow apples over there, so they are being dispossessed, they are being deprived of this land. Similarly, on the name of the construction of railway track or some ring roads or some other similar projects, the purpose basically that is not genuine, the development or prosperity. The intention, unfortunately, is nullified, and that is to bring about the this settler colonialism, which Israel did, and on the same pattern and on the same line, India is trying to do the same in Kashmir, and now these efforts have been intensified in Jammu and Kashmir.
Absolutely. Faisal, I want your take on this as well, because while we talk about these changes, we have, of course, also spoken about 2019 and, of course, the unilateral actions that were taken then were given a very serious reaction by Pakistan as well, in terms of how this is against the UN Security Council resolutions, and how, of course, that does not change the special status of the occupied valley. And while that still is true, we are in 2025 where there hasn't been any real consequence to those very major actions taken by the Indian state. And so I want your perspective then on when we can have unilateral actions on that level being taken without consequence. We have all of these setups of infrastructure and buildings and housings within the occupied valley as well, again with no consequence. So what really then is the way forward in terms of actualizing the rights of the people of Kashmir and actually moving forward with the UN Security Council resolutions? They are in place, of course, to prohibit or to eliminate the possibility of something happening which isn't in line with them. But if that's not happening, then what is the importance of those resolutions in light of what we see happening to the people while we talk?
Sana, you are very right about it, and first of all, Dr. Awais has very nicely put everything on the table, and this is what the real situation of Kashmir is right now. I fully endorse it. Each and every word he has spoken, it is the true reflection of today's Kashmir, number one. And number two, when we come towards United Nations, I mean, in an ideal world, what we seek from United Nations is to, of course, make sure that their resolutions are implemented, and number two, nobody ever dares to, of course, differ from whatever the position United Nations has taken, especially in a place like Kashmir, which is always considered as a flashpoint, a nuclear flashpoint. Reason being, Pakistan and India, both of them, they are head on only because of one reason. Bone of contention is Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where since the day one we have been seeing that the by force Indians, they penetrate in there and then they keep the land, and wars were fought over this. And then what happens is suddenly when we saw that the hardliner Hindutva ideology prevails in India, and once it prevails, of course, people like Modi, who used to be termed as butcher of Gujarat, because his being famous in India, the only one reason was that he loved butchering Muslims of Gujarat at that time, and he facilitated that genocide, I must call it. And later on he becomes, of course, Prime Minister of India. Is the very man once was declared persona non grata in terms of different countries. They simply said that they will not be of course allowing him to enter in their own country. And when he becomes Prime Minister, of course everything goes hunky-dory for the Western world. And the same Western world, what they start bidding on is that today's India is the India that we require to, of course, pose a challenge to China. They have their own endeavors in South China Sea. Of course, they seek influence of India to counter the influence of China in the region. And of course, in this whole scenario, people of Kashmir, they are suffering, and India comes up with the obviously abrogation of 370 and 35A, which is utterly against the UN resolutions, which is a unilateral decision. which is not bilateral at all or not trilateral at all, and still nobody said anything about it. And when it comes to the Western world, of course, we know that they are sitting down and watching like ducks and do nothing, and they know that their own media is not being allowed to get into Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to, of course, bring out the truth from there. And the kind of situation in Kashmir is right now, there was no assembly for almost 5 years, and there was not a single legislature allowed to, of course, speak against the center, New Delhi. Of course, New Delhi was dictating its terms, and its terms were entirely of course revolving around Hindutva ideology. That is why we are seeing that the cherry picked people who have been brought in from elsewhere in India into Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and these are the intruders who are interlocutors as well of of course Hindutva ideology, and they are the ones who are getting simple facilitations for each and everything, for domicile, for business, for their land, for if they want to make a house. Each and everything is being made easier for them. But when it comes to, of course, Kashmiris themselves, their lands are being crafted that this land is used for agriculture, this land has this importance, that land had that importance, and every important land they want to, of course, take it out of the hands of the Kashmiri people. Reason being, they don't want to see Kashmiris having an upper hand. They were the majority, they still are the majority, but the kind of applications which Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is seeing from the center, New Delhi, of course, that application suggests that the demographics of India, of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, it is going to be changed. And the biggest reason behind it is that they know that this is the only way they can silence the truth, silence the voice, and silence the voice that actually represents the misery of the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And to me, once more, I think United Nations, if it really believes in sustaining its position in the world as to be an organization that of course solves all of the problems, they must of course do justice with people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. If they don't do it, then of course they must remember that League of the Nations, it was shattered after 1930s when they couldn't do anything about Nazi Germany. And today's Hindutva India, if they don't do anything about it, then of course I don't see United Nations having a future.
Absolutely. But while we of course talk about that, I want your understanding, Farrukh, in terms of the ways that we have actually dealt with this in the past decades or so. That's very, very essential, of course, in terms of the way forward and the struggle of the people of Kashmir generationally that has gone forward. Can we still keep on looking towards the UN for a solution for this?
Right, Sana, thank you very much. There are three aspects to your question. One is, of course, because it is the broader question, India, what India is doing in Kashmir. The other one is Pakistan's response to it, and then of course the UN itself. So I want to, sometimes I think that my rest of my life will be spent telling you I told you so. If we go 1 year back, and I just want to actually one day sit down with the producers of this program and pull up the old footage and tell you who was saying what and what did I say, and then show you how everything that I predicted is becoming a reality. That will be some perhaps a shocker, but the things are not that simple, Sana. When it comes to what is happening in Kashmir, it is not merely about one Modi or Modi's regime or Hindutva or whatever. India has been a usurper. India has been suppressor of violator of human rights in Kashmir right from Nehru's time to this day. And there seems to be, and there is a perverse sense of justice in rule of jungle, law of jungle, right? Because if one animal, one predator eats something, some other animal, then another predator can eat that one also. And repeatedly, the Indian opposition that seems to be crying hoarse right now, they are the people who have been building this consensus machine that actually turns every Indian into an automaton when it comes to Kashmir, and they all want to Kashmir to actually keep on India to keep on usurping. There are few honorable mentions or people who might be actually going against the tide, but most of them are doing exactly that. So today what is happening, it is a continuation of what was happening 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Now I want to actually now speak about UN, because my heart goes out to the emaciated body that is now UN. Of course, everything that Faisal actually talks about usually comes to life, and that thing happens. Then what I tell you afterward actually also happens, right? So if he is after UN, congratulations, someday you'll get it out of the way also. But the problem with UN, Sana, is that it is in a very complicated, tricky situation. Right now, where it stands, it is like room of requirement from Harry Potter, or come and go room. Sometimes it is there, sometimes it is not. Of course, it is a body that stands together because of the consensus of around 200 countries, and then it has a UNSC that is supposed to power it, and it is a political center. But what happens now? Because in the past 10 years, two countries which have actually gained incredible power during the war on terror, one is Israel, one is India, because they gained too much power, and they have been violating human rights incrementally. And UN has tried to actually do something about it. UNSC twice convened after what India did in Article 370 and 35A. After that, UN twice met, and of course it tried to do something about Israel's oppression in Gaza. So what is happening is that these people have hardened right-wing extremists that my dear brother has been supporting from time to time, and those right-wing extremists immediately attack UN, and because of that, UN is in a precarious situation. So we'll get our heart's desire. One day UN will be gone, and then we will say what good it does to the world. But regarding the state of affairs right now, Sana, we are a country with limited resources. We have been doing an incredible job of keeping this issue alive, and that is because of heroism of Kashmiris who have been sacrificing their lives, their property, their comfort, everything for generation after generation. So I think that at this moment, while I don't have any crystallized solution for you, I can tell you one thing for sure. If it continues, there will come a time when you will find justice for Kashmiris. But it will be, once again, some kind of perverse justice, because India is an oppressor. So another predator will do with India like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They destroy his house, then the next thing, aliens come and destroy the entire planet. And he is the only one who is actually standing and laughing. So the fact is that at this moment, India, Israel, and countries like that are destroying world order, and because of that, we are going to see diminishing returns on human rights debates.
Right. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more discussion on this. Welcome back to the debate. We're, of course, discussing the issue of Kashmir. And Dr. Awais, I want your opinion on this in terms of the ways that we're talking about where can we actually find the hope for change and where can we actually direct the struggle towards. While, of course, the UN's redundancy in a lot of ways is very obvious. That is, of course, an organization that is in place, and we have, of course, the UN Security Council resolutions. I want your perspective in terms of then where do you think the people of Kashmir will actually derive their strength and hope from, and which direction can this struggle take, where it helps and where there is a possibility of change, and how, of course, countries like Pakistan, who are standing with them, can contribute towards that.
You know, as the other panelists, Raja Faisal Saab and Pitafi Saab, they have also discussed, you know, the whole dynamics and the context and the questionable role of United Nations. So keeping this context in view, I think that Kashmiris, they are resilient, and India, despite making all these efforts, could not subdue Kashmiris and their sentiment and their this freedom sentiment that is not only alive, that has been intensified over the years, and that is quite a silver lining in the whole this dark clouds. And I also see that this movement has been transferred to the next young generation, and it could be expected that sometime later more fear, mass uprising or resistance can be witnessed in Jammu and Kashmir. As far as the role of Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan needs to adopt the proactive and muscular diplomacy to advance this cause at international fora. And specifically, that I would like to mention that AJK government that should be strengthened, that should be empowered, and that should be projected the world over in such a way that that is the legitimate government of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and the remaining part that has been under Indian occupation, that needs to be get out of the clutches of Indian occupation. So I think that with these efforts and with these initiatives, there could be some silver lining that J&K would one day that will get freedom from the clutches of India.
That is, of course, the hope. Thank you very much, Dr. Awais, for joining us and in being a part of the discussion on this very important issue. We're now going to move on to our next discussion, which is, of course, with reference to the internal political situation of the country and our fight against the menace of terrorism. And Faisal, I want your take on it. Just yesterday, we were talking about how consensus on this matter is very important. The full implementation of the National Action Plan is very important, both kinetic and non-kinetic measures as part of the agenda. So in terms of what we see coming in from the KP government and from the federal government, and a difference or divergence of opinion on this particular matter, what then is needed for these actions to have synergy? Because while we, of course, engage with the Afghan Taliban regime as a national front, there is, of course, the importance of having that cohesion within our own borders as to what is the best approach in dealing with this.
Yes, Anna, this is obviously, yesterday we were talking about it, and of course, when it comes to, center and the provincial governments, both of them, of course, we know center is maintaining that foreign affairs is entirely a matter of the federal, and federal is to be dealing it with the other countries, because when it comes to Afghanistan, it's another country that you have to talk with. Even if you have to send a jirga, then that should be the federal government that should decide whether they want to send or not. And if they do want to send, then what kind of what kind of terms and conditions they should be applied, and that's how it should be. But when it comes to, of course, KPK government is, of course, of the opposition party. They are opposition in the center, and what they maintain is that they, being someone who are a lot closer to the other side of the border, in terms that there are many families who have relations on the other side, and then they share the language as well, and then obviously you know, the border is kind of border where so many villages, half of the village is on the other side and the rest of the village is on this side, and there are families who are interlinked and obviously married to each other. So on these bases, they believe that as they share the culture of jirga, of course they are the ones who supposed to be sending a grand jirga to the other side, and that needs to be talking to Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan to of course talk with TTP. I mean, once more talks. We have been maintaining this, that there should be a resolve, and that should resolve is the only resolve, and that is to nip them all wherever they are, because these kind of tactics would only allow them to have more leverage in terms of gaining more time to conduct more terrorist activities in Pakistan. To me, I think both of the centre as well as KP government, both of them, they need to sit down together first and then decide that the federal is supposed to send a jirga. If there is a jirga, need to be sent there.
Right. Your take on this, Farrukh?
Right. When Faisal was talking about divided families, I thought that he is talking about divided parties also. Perhaps PTI is on the other side also. Then I thought maybe TTA or TTP might be one of the wings on the other side. But here's the fact. PTI never tires of talking about constitution, constitution, constitution. Every time I listen to somebody from their side, they're speaking about constitution. Show me the clause in the constitution which allows any federating unit to actually conduct its independent foreign policy. If that is not so, then what the hell is happening? Why would you practically undermine your own federation? Why would you undermine your own center in such a way? I think that the PTI has two ways. One, when it comes to power at the center, then it has to actually crush everybody who has any kind of thing to say. But when they are in opposition, of course, then they have to use every federating unit or whatever power they have to practically undermine the Federation of Pakistan. This is what is happening. And what good is a jirga going to do? Are you going to just convince them that, okay, you know, something has changed and now all of a sudden change your heart? Afghan Taliban have leverage in the shape of TTP. Why would they give up that leverage? The only fact is that at this moment it seems that they are you know, very close to TTP, and TTP and other such groups are very close to India. So the fact is, anybody who has this bleeding heart for Afghan Taliban actually has bleeding heart for India. So okay, right? Just tell us that you stand for pro-India policy where you want them to practically undermine Pakistan, and I'll be silent about it. I will just say, okay, then you have no place in governing any federating unit.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being a part of the debate. That's all that we have from the discussion. Of course, much remains to be seen as to how we proceed with the fight against terrorism, but one thing is clear, that there is absolutely no tolerance for terrorist activities in Pakistan, and Pakistan will be making all efforts in this regard. That's all that we have from the debate today. We'll now see you tomorrow.